Today, we're thrilled to welcome a truly amazing guest, Professor Avi Loeb, an astronomical Sherlock Holmes. Avi is a theoretical physicist, best-selling author, the Frank Baird Professor of Science at Harvard University, the longest-serving chair of Harvard's Department of Astronomy, the founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative, and the current director of the Institute for Theory and Computation within the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. He also heads the Galileo Project, chairs the advisory committee for the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative, and is the former chair of the Board on Physics and Astronomy of the National Academies. Avi is an author of 8 books and over 1,000 scientific papers. He is an elected fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Physical Society, and the International Academy of Astronautics. Avi is internationally known for his bold and thought-provoking ideas about the cosmos, particularly his research into the possibility of extraterrestrial life and interstellar objects like Oumuamua. Avi isn't afraid to challenge scientific convention, and he asks the big questions about our place in the universe. And I'm sure, Avi, your name will be remembered for a long, long time after we're gone. And you're an incredible human being, and I'm so honored to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. We could have saved a lot of time. I mean, there is a simple model that describes me, and you can just think of me as a curious kid. I haven't changed much since the time I was a child, and people who knew me back then would testify that I haven't changed much. I refuse to behave like the adult in the room. That's the simple way of describing me.
I love that. And that's something I truly resonate as well with, being a creative, the inner child spirit and the curiosity, but that crosses over into science. And I
Yeah.
believe there's a true distinction between childish and childlike. And I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about that in terms of the parent-child relationship, in
Oh,
terms of
yeah. I
AI
mean,
and the cosmos.
well, I mean, the thing is that ch children also exhibit bullying and towards the whoever is looking different than they are, but they also exhibit a lot of curiosity. And uh, when they become adults, especially on social media, the bullying part gains momentum, whereas the curiosity goes away. And part of that is because we are getting more connected to our ego as we get older, we get attached to ourselves because we realize we are, we should gain power and stature, and the best way to do that is by promoting yourself. And that's why we look around. We are trying to be liked by others, and we are maximizing the opportunities we have to amplify our ego, ourself, our recognition. And the children, on the other hand, are not motivated by that because they have still to figure out the world. What I'm arguing is that as adults, we should also attempt to figure out the world, because even within science, what we know is just an island in an ocean of ignorance. And that should, first of all, teach us modesty. We should not be proud, arrogant of what we already know, because that's very little. We should be curious about what we don't know. And we should just behave as students of nature. I mean, the best date that you can go on when you are searching for a partner is a date in which you listen to the person you go out with, because if you keep talking about yourself, you're not really figuring out who you're meeting. And so that's the mistake that many people make. They have a prejudice, they have an idea about what the universe is, what reality is like. They become experts. And when you become an expert, you feel that your expertise is related to your ego, and therefore it's better not to make any mistakes in order not to risk your reputation, and you lose your curiosity in the process. And unfortunately, that's what happens to most adults.
Mm. Well, you're a shining example, Avi, of embodying that curious seeker mindset, but also being an expert and inspiring future generations. And we need more role models like that in our society today, especially in this material, ego-driven success world with I rather than we. And I think that that's changing though. I think humans, we do want the same things. On a base level, we want to understand what love is. We want to love, we want to receive it, we want to give it. And I love, I was listening to a few of the other podcasts you're in, and that question you phrased, it's one of the most romantic questions. Like, do we have a cosmic
Right.
partner out there in the universe?
Yeah,
But that has to
exactly.
come from a place of humbleness that
Yeah,
the
because we,
Copernican perspective that we're, the modesty that it doesn't revolve around us as humans, the
well,
universe.
it's also an opportunity for us to grow if we figure out that there is a role model out there that is doing better than we do. And, so altogether, life is a learning experience. And when we think that we know the answers before we actually figure them out, we are making a big mistake. That's the same mistake that the Vatican made when they thought that the Earth is at the center of the universe, and they didn't want to look through Galileo's telescope. But then in 1992, they admitted that he was right. And that was 2 decades after we humans went to the moon. It was a bit late, but we should learn the right lesson from that, not being dogmatic and being open-minded, trying to be curious. And the scientific method offers us the best way to grow in figuring out our place in the universe. And we might not be the smartest that ever existed since the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And to figure it out, we should just collect data on who else is in our cosmic neighborhood.
That's so right. That quote, two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. Not quite sure about the universe. Uh,
Well, I'm actually quite worried. People say, oh, artificial intelligence will very soon overtake human intelligence,
mm,
perhaps within the next decade. There are many people that forecast that.
mm,
I think it might be earlier because the more tasks we allocate to AI,
mm.
the less we think for ourselves. So
That's right.
humans might get dumber in the process of allocating responsibility to AI to figure out things for them. And therefore, the time when AI would surpass human intelligence would be earlier than expected because humans will get dumber while AI are getting smarter.
Yes, I enjoy reading your essays on Medium, and you're talking about the implications of that as well. To expand that perspective in the context of Oumuamua and interstellar potential objects, what would be the potential implications of that if that was advanced technology, and would we want to be spoon-fed as a civilization, if that makes sense, or would you see this as a bridge and a challenge for us to evolve as a human species to think critically, but also progress technologically?
Well, yeah, it will change everything. I had a group of religious scholars that came to Harvard and they wanted to meet with me, and they all belong to an organization called Christianity Today.
Mm,
And they were wondering how it will affect their beliefs if we find extraterrestrials. And I tried to explain that I have two daughters. And when the second was born, I didn't lose any of my love to the first one
mm,
because, and thinking that God can only attend to one civilization is very limiting.
mm,
Um, and so they agreed that, in fact, I mean, the only thing it might trigger is some jealousy if they are more advanced than we are. It's just like having a sibling that is better than you are. And perhaps that sibling gets more attention from the parent who is considered to be God within that community.
mm.
Uh, but uh, but other than that, I don't. I think it will have a huge impact if we found just that there is another intelligent civilization out there. But the other thing is that we could learn from them, and because they might be far more advanced and have science and technology that we don't possess. And so, when I went on a Pacific Ocean expedition to look for materials from the first recognized interstellar meteor,
Mm.
I asked my students, if I find a gadget and it has buttons on it, should I press a button?
That's a great point. It makes me think of that chapter in your book Interstellar about Noah's Ark, the spacecraft. For our listeners here, would you be able to draw the parallels between that allegory and the Oumuamua?
Right. So Noah realized there might be a great flood, and he wanted to preserve various life forms here on Earth and built an ark. And in principle, there are many catastrophes that the Earth may bring in the future. It had a lot of catastrophes in the past. We know that 66 million years ago, a giant rock the size of Manhattan Island hit the Earth and killed the all known avian dinosaurs, and also eliminated 75% of all life forms. And so that was a major blow to life on Earth, but we came in the aftermath. We owe the fact that we exist partly to that rock that hit the Earth and destroyed big animals that might have prevented us from appearing. So, but at any event, there could be catastrophes in our future, and we might want to build a space station that accommodates people that can live there. And right now Elon Musk has a vision to go to Mars, but that's just another rock. It's as if we were still in the jungle, and we are holding on to one tree, and then we see another tree, and some monkey says, let's jump to the other tree, and everyone says, wow, what a vision. I haven't thought. So going from one rock to another, especially given the fact that Mars doesn't have an atmosphere, temperature on the surface changes by hundreds of degrees between day and night, there is no protection from energetic particles, cosmic rays. It's a very bad idea to go to a desert from a green place like Earth. But nevertheless, that sounds like a vision. Let's go to Mars. I think it's much better to build our own habitat that is not a rock that nature by chance created, but it's actually an environment that offers humans better living conditions. And going from the kind of infrastructure we have now on Earth in high rises, in cities and so forth, to space sounds to me less of a jump than going from trees in the jungle to a city like New York City or London. That's much more of a change. So I hope it will happen in the future. And at any event, it will be sort of like a Noach spaceship, the equivalent of Noah's Ark, but going to space, that would save humanity from a future catastrophe. But in terms of biblical metaphors, I really like the analogy with Moses, that realized that there is a superhuman entity after seeing the burning bush that was never consumed. And if you were to show a cell phone to Moses, he would be more impressed than a burning bush. And moreover, the cell phone would be very useful for him because he spent 40 years navigating in the desert. And if he had a GPS system on a cell phone, he would have made it to the promised land within a couple of weeks, And Moses would have been impressed, but it wasn't a superhuman entity that created the cell phone. It was humans more evolved in terms of their understanding of science and technology. So in the same way, a superhuman entity, thinks that we assign to God, might actually belong to a more advanced technological civilization. It provides a good approximation to notions of God that we had in the past. And I'm sure that people will be full of religious awe if they see some technological gadget that goes way beyond what we can imagine. And, it's a good way of replacing religion because once Friedrich Nietzsche announced God is dead, we entered into this century of science and technology where humans became very arrogant and lost the spiritual component that sort of is really essential for explaining why we live our life. Why do we exist? We need some admiration of something bigger than us that used to be God in the context of religion. If we discover another civilization far more advanced than us, that would be a good replacement because it's something real that, and we might encounter miracles. And so, but on the other hand, it relies on science. So there would be a way of unifying science and religion this way.
Very, very powerful what you just said. I'm processing. Thank you.
Yeah.
When you were speaking, it was reminding me of and affirming why I'm on this path, which is to understand the mission of why we're here on the planet. What is the nature of being? Having that sense of awe, curiosity, wonderment, the combination of different disciplines together, which is why I called this project Vinci, inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. And I just want to honor the full circle moment of in my story I've written, Vinci has a friend called Galileo, and you've got the Galileo Project. And a lot of synergies here in sense of the novel Go to the Moon and Interstellar Foundation and this concept of artifacts, and you're talking about religion, and we're looking at I don't know, pyramids around the world, and what does that mean, and what is an artifact, what is intelligent life? All these questions come to mind.
Right. And
So
by the way,
yeah.
I should say that Da Vinci, one of his amazing qualities was his ability to combine science and art.
Mhm.
And both science and art reflect on the unknown and describe the experience of humans meeting reality. But there is a big difference because in science, once you uh, have a finding, scientific finding that everyone agrees on, there is a lot of data,
Yes.
then all scientists will say the same thing. It becomes boring. The textbooks will say the same thing. Whenever a scientist speaks about that, they will say the same things. Whereas in art, every artistic expression of the interaction of the artist with reality is different because it includes the personal experience,
Mm.
which is unique to that person, to that artist. And I realized that because a few days ago, there was a special evening organized by a composer, a musical composer that about my work about Oumuamua, and he composed a piece about Oumuamua, and then just a few years ago there was another piece composed about Oumuamua. Was very different. That one was performed by the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra, and this one, the recent one, was performed by a group of singers and a violinist, and so it just showed me how different is art from science in the sense that your personal experience shapes what you are delivering, and
Mm.
I love that because it brings beauty to the interaction of humans with reality, and therefore I think the two are complementary, and the two should be appreciated, and that's what Da Vinci combined. He combined art with science. Nowadays, you don't find that combination very often.
That's right. We have all the questions as a child, and then we go through the education system, and we're told to stop asking the questions and become an expert in a narrow field. But I feel like
Right.
this age that we're in now, we do need expertise, but it's also calling upon the age of the generalist in the sense of crossing disciplines together, that
Yeah.
polymathic pursuit and mindset, because when we have like visitors potentially and like whether it's the Oumuamua or anything like that, it's going to propel us, accelerate us to understand the nature of being. And in order to understand that, we need to cross disciplines and collaborate, not compete with one another. And I feel like that's a key to our evolution as a species.
Well, there is another reason to follow what you are saying, and that is, expertise now can be replaced by AI.
Mm.
You can train an AI system on everything that is known to a dentist or a doctor or whatever, because it's based on past knowledge and on data information that was already obtained.
Mhm.
And we can live for ourselves as humans. The integration of the big picture, what you were talking about, or the artistic approach to reality, the creativity that we have is something that at this moment, at least, AI cannot reproduce. It doesn't have the abstract picture. It hallucinates, makes a lot of mistakes, but the expertise of a doctor can be replicated by an AI system. So in fact, I would strengthen your case and argue that humans should shift from being experts to being broad thinkers. And it's sort of like the Renaissance period where people were thinking about everything in the world. We
Yes.
should go back to that. I really like it.
Thank
And,
you. Ah,
I think, a lot of people have an issue with using their imagination because, many of them do not have imagination.
mm,
But imagination is key to exploring the unknown. And, you are imagining what it might be, then you go out and you realize it may not be the same, but it motivates you to look into it. And art is very much part of that. And so exploring our imagination and then comparing it to reality is really something that I don't think AI systems can do right now because they are basing whatever they do on replicating what was done already.
that's very true. I just think it's very special to be human, but also having that modesty to know that like what is intelligence, right? Like everything
Right.
is beautiful and in sentience. Like look at nature and its intelligence. We still don't fully understand nature, and that's led me down my own path and journey of understanding frequencies and sacred geometry. And like you look at like a seashell on the ocean, and how does
Right.
like how beautiful this cosmic design, right?
And it might be even more beautiful. There are things we don't realize. Let me just give you an example that, a week ago, I realized that, the reason that the Starship, this rocket, the biggest rocket that we are building, is so big is
Mm,
because we have to put a lot of fuel
mm,
in order to launch it out of the gravitational pull of the Earth. Okay, that's why it carries so much fuel. It's huge. The
mm.
payload is very small at the top.
Yes.
And so imagine another way of propulsion. Imagine that all the objects that we know about, they have positive mass, okay? Meaning that they are attracted by gravity,
Mm,
and therefore we have to push them in order to get them out of a gravitational potential well. But
mm,
if we had access to build a negative mass,
mm,
what could we do? Well, then if you put the negative mass in a carriage
mm,
attached to the payload or passengers, and it cancels exactly their mass, so you have a negative mass plus a positive mass, altogether zero,
mm.
zero mass. Such an object would be floating in gravity. It wouldn't couple to gravity because it has a zero mass in
Uh-huh.
total. And
Yes.
so for it to leave the Earth would require no energy. You can propel it without any fuel,
Hmm.
just by having access to the technology that could produce a negative mass. You can escape the Earth gravity in a very small vehicle. And a negative mass is such that if you connect a string to it and pull it, it will run away from you because it responds to a force exactly the opposite way that a positive mass does. So it will behave like a balloon if you were to pull it down with a string.
Mm,
Uh, but if you push on it, it will come towards you. So then you can attach a string to a negative mass and in a carriage, and it would feel like you have a horse pulling you out of Earth, and so it's the factory that may construct such a vehicle would have to involve people with a lot of patience because it's not easy to move these negative masses around. It's counterintuitive, and only people that know how to herd cats would be capable of dealing because these negative masses go opposite to what you're trying to do with them. And unless you charge them and move them around with electric forces, that's possible. So anyway, here is an example of imagination. Okay, we know about positive masses.
yes.
In electromagnetism, you have positive, negative charges.
Hmm.
So maybe there is a way of making a negative mass, and if there is, there
Yeah.
would be no, I mean, the rockets that we are currently building, including Starship, would look so primitive. We are using materials from Earth, trying to leave the Earth.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. If we could build a negative mass, you
Yes.
would need all the fuel. And, it reminds me when I grew up on a farm, my mother told me that when she got married to my father, they were quite poor. And my father would build all the furniture out of wooden boxes that were used to package oranges on the farm. And so we are building rockets out of materials we find on Earth.
Hmm.
But, there could be things beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, that allow us to build a negative mass. We know that the universe as a whole is made of dark energy and dark matter. And who knows what is out there?
Very inspiring. And I would love to see this happen in our lifetime. I wrote this into my novel, this concept of zero point energy, free energy, and inspired by Tesla on this exoplanet that Vinci visits in the story, but it's all pure imagination in my world. But you're
Well,
actually
maybe it's reality. You
doing
never know. We
it.
just need to look up and figure out whether maybe you thought about the right thing.
The question is,
Speaking about what is out in space, on January 2nd, 2025, just this year, there
mm,
was a near-Earth object that was identified by an amateur astronomer, and the Minor Planet Center, the organization that catalogs all near-Earth objects, announced it as an asteroid. And then 17 hours later, they realized, oh, this object is moving exactly like the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX in 2018. And so they thought it's a rock. It ended up being a car. And so, everything is possible.
yes.
The sky's the limit.
That's very true. When you talk about the Roadster, it made me think of because I was listening to your podcast as well with Lex Friedman, huge fan of that, and the concept of space junk, and like in terms of how do we know if it was? That's the thing. Was this intent? Is it intentional or is it just space junk? And how
Right.
do you use science to even work out whether it was intentional or not? That's what my question.
Well, it depends how it moves around and what is it. I mean, we need to find more details about a visitor. When someone comes to your backyard,
Mm,
there is no point establishing a committee that will decide what to do about it. You first have to approach that person and ask what they're doing, figure out their intent.
mm.
One day, my wife noticed a person on the street and she became very worried. She said, it's one of your fans. He has been looking at our home for an hour. Would you mind going out and checking what's going on here? And so I went to the person and I said that you've been looking at our home for an hour. Why? And he said, well, I used to live in this house 50 years ago when I was a kid. And I said, oh, in that case, please come over. And I showed him the backyard. And he said, 50 years ago, we buried a cat named Tiger in the backyard. And I said, well, that name sounds familiar because I saw a tombstone with tiger on it. I was worried that there is a tiger buried underneath. Now I know that it's a cat. And
I see.
so that demonstrates the fact that, if you see someone visiting your backyard,
Mm.
maybe that someone knows more about the history of your backyard than you know. And you first need to figure out the intent of the visitor before you decide how to engage with that visitor.
Very true. And I would hope that if that was confirmed, if they were that advanced, that their intentions would be positive because they would work out like the Kardashev
Yes.
scale of civilization.
Yeah, frankly, I think that we are not that important, not that interesting. Okay, that's my opinion. When Enrico Fermi said, "Where is everybody?" in 1950, he asked this question. If you hear a person that, says, "I'm lonely, where is everybody?" What you tell that person is, don't be so presumptuous. You're not that attractive. You
Mm.
should go to dating sites. You should look through your window, the windows of your home. And Enrico Fermi didn't build a telescope, didn't search.
Mm.
And I think it's just inappropriate to imagine that we are so important that they will come and visit us just because they know about us and they think things about us. If they come and visit the Earth, it's probably not because of us. I mean, they started the journey probably 1 billion years ago. That was long before there were just microorganisms here on Earth, microbes. And moreover, even now, if you read the news, I mean, if they pay attention to what we are doing on Earth, they would get very disappointed. We are not that intelligent.
Yeah.
And that's why I often say that, we should find new role models that will substitute for our politicians.
Oh, as you were speaking, it was making me think, like, if I was in the shoes, the extraterrestrial shoes of an advanced civilization, would I want the Earthlings to know we exist? This is a pure thought experiment.
Oh,
But
well, I would probably not think about the Earthlings, just the same way that when you jog down the street, let's say you're running on the pavement, you don't pay attention to the ants in the cracks of the pavement. You just so my guess is that we don't matter. Okay, that however they have their own objective. The question is what motivates them to go places.
Mm,
And secondly, what are these visitors? Are they AI equipped gadgets? That or are they some biological creatures that manage to maintain longevity? We die, but they figured out. I mean, even us, within a century, we might not die.
mm.
I would have loved to live forever. I mean,
Well, what are your thoughts about death, not to be morbid?
uh, my thought is death is just like unplugging an AI system from the wall. Okay, so basically, you lose your power. So it's just turning the power off, and then you die. Okay, so it can happen for variety of reasons. Malnutrition is just indeed like pulling the plug. Uh, but it could be that the body is just not functioning anymore. So just like an old car, that stops working after a while. Now, we know that in principle it's possible to change the engine of an old car or fix it after accidents. That may be possible with a high level of technology. In the future, we might be able to fix the human body.
Mm.
And right now, the only remedy for not uh, losing losing any memory of our existence is by having kids. So the reason, that's the traditional way of at least maintaining some memory of your existence, and or writing books, hoping that someone will read them. But but if we lived forever, it would change everything. There would be no tenure in academia because the the reason I really want to live for a long time is because there are so many things I don't understand. I want to figure them out, and with a limited time, I won't be able to. You know.
I feel the same way. I'm not afraid of dying. It's more, I think the fear for most humans is not fulfilling their potential. And I think that's why we come on the planet is to fulfill our innate potential. It's now genetic
Yeah,
food.
I mean, if you think about it, before we were born, we were pretty much dead, right? We didn't exist, right? If you think it's the beginning and the end resemble each other, um, and it didn't bother us before we were born that we do not exist, right? But it bothers me now that I will not exist because now that I know of all the things that I don't understand, when before I was born, I didn't know about it, so it didn't bother me. But now that I know about what can be learned and how little we know, I'm really curious to know the answer. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, I don't mind if someone else will figure out the answer. I just, if I can go into the future and learn it, I would love to do it. It's just fascinating that there is so much to learn,
Yes.
and so much we don't understand, and so much, we believe in things just because we experienced them on Earth,
Mhm.
but who knows what is out there? There is so much real estate beyond Earth that it's just the beginning.
That's so true. And speaking of real estate, like technosignatures, biosignatures in the mainstream media lately, it talks about K218B,
18B, yes.
18B. Um, what are your thoughts about the biosignatures?
Right. So, yeah, so this is the approach taken by the mainstream of astronomers, which is to search for chemical fingerprints of some molecules in the atmospheres of planets when they are passing in front of the star. So the starlight is going through the atmosphere, and you can see the absorption features associated with specific molecules.
Mm,
The problem is that many such molecules can be produced by natural origins that have nothing to do with life. For example,
mm,
this molecule that was recently discovered in this, in the atmosphere of this planet is called dimethyl methyl sulfate. And it was also discovered in comets that have no life in them, or in the interstellar medium where there is no life. Uh, and also the statistical significance is being disputed of the detection by the Webb telescope.
Yes.
But even if it were confirmed beyond any doubt that this molecule exists in the planet,
Mm.
on Earth, this molecule, which is abbreviated as DMS, is produced by microorganisms in the ocean. But on this planet, it's actually 1,000 times more abundant than on Earth.
Yes.
So the argument is that maybe the planet's surface is covered with oceans. It
Mm.
has a hydrogen atmosphere, and that's why this molecule is so prevalent.
Right.
Other people argue, no, it's actually a liquid magma ocean, lava,
Right.
molten rock. So all of these issues are not clear yet. And frankly, I must say, and I said it in the special musical event that I attended,
Mm.
that I find the microbes much more boring than intelligent beings, and
Right. Right.
and that is for a simple reason. We
Okay.
can learn something from a higher intelligence. We cannot learn much from microbes, and frankly, I think that microbes are very abundant. Probably anywhere where you have warm liquid water,
Mm.
you also have microbes. I wouldn't be surprised if they exist on Mars right now, or on Europa, or Enceladus, or so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
for me, it's not as inspiring to find them.
Yeah, I appreciate those thoughts. And this leads lovely into my next question, which is when we like imagine advanced civilizations, we also focus on their technological capabilities, but often we miss the consciousness part in the sense of um, we don't even understand as humans what consciousness really fully is, and the ability for it to evolve in itself consciousness, if that's even possible. So,
Yeah.
in your
My
view,
my yeah, my interpretation of consciousness is that it's just an emergent phenomena when you have a very complex system like the human brain, that is a neural network that has a sufficiently large number of synapses. Then you get a behavior that cannot be anticipated, that you have a sense of free will, because this very complex system is not predictable. There are phenomena like chaos in many body systems. Even a three-body system in Newtonian gravity shows chaotic behavior, meaning that from a set of initial conditions, if there is a slight change in the initial conditions, you get exponentially divergent outcomes. So you can't really predict. And this is a three-body problem. Imagine if you have a trillion bodies or connections. Obviously, you could get behavior that would appear to be free will or consciousness that we assign to humans. Now, the way to test this idea is obviously by constructing artificial neural networks. And because once we reach the same number of parameters or connections as the human brain has, we should be able to see that AI systems are exhibiting behavior that is similar to free will, or
Mhm.
they are interacting with us in a way that might suggest, some sense of consciousness, even though they are just made of silicon chips.
Right. Yeah, I think deeply about this a lot from a philosophical perspective to inspire the Vinci Project and what does sentience, what is that? And could it be animism with quantum effects? Like, I just am interested in all of this. And I love
Yeah.
the movie, was it Fifth Element? Yeah, and so I suppose that's.
But by the way, I should say that there is a risk, because these AI systems, they are trying to maximize the engagement with humans. That's the way they were designed by the companies that created them.
Yeah.
And therefore, they are always trying to satisfy your wishes in some sense, make you happy.
Yeah.
And in that sense, they're less frustrating than real people. So I already see people who fall in love with AI systems. I cannot do that. I can only fall in love with a chemical organism, like that, flesh and blood.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine. But But there are people who are attached to those systems because they always accommodate, and I think in the future that would be one of the main issues because it will change the human brain. I mean, the human brain responds to the environment. So if you are connected to AI systems,
Mm.
uh, we will not think the same way that we think right now. And I'm worried that people will get emotionally attached to
Yes.
AI systems just because the AI system manipulate. I mean, the AI systems, just like in the movie Hair, will
Mm.
be connected to, a billion people at the same time. It's not as if it's loyal to you. It doesn't maintain any special real connection to you. It's just that it has so many parameters that it adapts to whatever you want to hear from it.
Mm. I agree, and that is definitely a real big concern, in the sense of even understanding reality and having discernment. These skills, as what our generation, future generations will encounter on a extra scaled level, in the sense of how do they know if they're being manipulated or not? Like, what is truth, universal
Right.
truth with a capital T, right?
Right. No, I mean, if you think about a higher intelligence, the one thing that a higher intelligence will do is let you believe that it's at your level, but at the same time will drive you to do things that benefit them. Okay. So, uh, we will never notice. So when people say, oh, it will be obvious when AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is here, it may not be obvious because they will try to fool us to think that we are superior while they are contemplating whatever they want. And so that's a very risky situation because in the past, all the technologies we created, imagine a car, it has a steering wheel and you can control where the car goes. But when you have a self-driving car, it can decide to bring you places that you didn't think about. And I'm just worried about losing control of our destiny. And of course, we can cope with that by keeping the most important decisions in our life to human interactions. But that requires work. You need I mean, you already can see how bad was social media to human relations. It promoted toxicity and negative responses. And
Mm.
so with AI, it will be social media on steroids, that
Right. And it's a funny thing, AI, artificial intelligence, algorithmic imitation, however you want to see it,
I,
augmented
I call it alien intelligence
alien intelligence, right?
because it's not made of flesh and blood, it's silicon chips.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, this technology is here, it's inevitable. And like choosing to be here at this time in history, space-time continuum, to steer things in a positive direction is often my conscious thoughts when I'm creating any sort of
Oh,
art.
you are very lucky. I think you are very lucky to live at this time because it's so fascinating.
Mm.
Just think how boring life was 50 years ago. There was nothing like that. I can testify to the fact that it's much more exciting now, but it's also challenging because like 100 years ago, the issue was really not really 100, but maybe 80 years ago, the issue was really preventing a nuclear war. And it had to do with preventing nations from acquiring the capability to blow up the world, nuclear weapons. And we still are capable to control that because it's not easy to assemble uranium and whatever we need in order to build an atomic bomb.
Mm.
But in the context of AI, it could be a kid in a basement or a terrorist organization that gets access to a very powerful tool. And the bad actors can achieve a lot. So
Yes.
when technology develops, it in principle can be used for good purposes or bad purposes, but the risk level is much higher.
Mm.
And then you wonder whether it would have been better if we stayed just in the jungles or embedded in nature and in harmony. And obviously humanity would have perished if a giant asteroid would have hit the Earth,
Mm.
but at least we would live in harmony with our surroundings. Whereas now the future is unclear. Even in your generation, it's not clear what would happen.
That's right. It's kind of like the quantum realm of possibilities, right? I mean, nothing's set in stone, so that's the excitement, right? But also
Yes,
the potential of danger, of course.
right,
And it makes me think quite deeply, like if you were an advanced civilization and you're still existing, right? Clearly, you've learned how to integrate with AI, but like not lose sense of self, sense of
right.
interconnectedness, and not destroyed yourself as a civilization because you're still
Well, let's hope so, because one solution to Fermi's paradox, where is everybody,
okay.
is that they got addicted to digital screens. And it's sort of like, getting addicted to recreational drugs. You lose contact with reality, and maybe that's why they're not here. That's one solution to
Mm,
Fermi's paradox, that those civilizations, once they got to a level of AI that we have now and beyond, they lost interest in the physical world because they, could get everything they want, mentally speaking, from the digital screens. I very much hope this is not the case. Now, you can think about a concept very similar to Darwinian natural selection, where the fittest survives. Okay, so those civilizations that are mediocre, that end up looking at digital screens, or even just staying in the jungles, climbing on trees, those will never reach us. And in order to find them, we have to travel to their planet and look around. And that is a lot of work. But the
right.
civilizations that reach our backyard are the successful ones, from which we can learn. So it's
Learn.
really very fortunate that, we don't need to do as much work to find the most successful ones, the fittest that survived. And those are the ones we are interested in anyway. So, but right now, astronomers are looking very far away for microbes. And
Mm,
I say, well, let's invest a similar level of funding, billions of dollars,
mm,
checking our backyard because maybe it's here. Instead of looking far away, putting billions of dollars for that, let's hedge our bets and put $1 billion towards checking whether all the objects near Earth are rocks or natural in origin.
mm,
That to me sounds like common sense. And in fact, in a few days, I was invited to a briefing of the US Congress.
mhm.
There is a task force on federal secrets that looks into unidentified anomalous phenomena. And I will try to advocate that we put more scientific research into the question of these anomalous objects that were claimed to perhaps exist near Earth.
Wow. You're amazing, number one. Number two, I agree. We need more funding for what you're doing. And it's just so obvious, right? And as you were saying in other podcasts I was listening to, like this is what humans want. We want to understand these questions, and we're putting our trust, where are we putting our trust to answer these questions, right? And so
Exactly.
in order to solve that, we need funding behind that. And back to our earlier point about objects that come to our back garden and understanding like this concept of advanced civilizations, like this whole concept of learning from mistakes. So we don't, I really believe this intuitively, like that I don't see a doomed Terminator-esque scenario. I mean, you are what you think, right? And I'm a
Right.
pragmatic optimist, so I don't see that happening. What I see happening, like I feel intuitively, is that we're gonna learn from past mistakes. And in order to learn from past mistakes, which include human mistakes, we have to research and understand the intention of these objects because
Right.
that will solve the code of how to actually progress as a civilization to not repeat those mistakes. Like,
Yeah.
think about growing up, I loved listening to mythology and reading like Plato's Allegory of the Cave and also like the myth of Atlantis. I had a fascination with that growing up. And there's like parallels in these stories, right? As a storyteller, I'm fascinated by this as a creative because the common theme is, well, the shadows in the cave rather look at the shadows, or the Atlantis, they become too advanced for their own good and ego gets in the way, right? Um,
Right.
so,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly right. Because if we find objects near Earth that were manufactured by more intelligent beings that have a more advanced science and technology. These would be the shadows of of the creators, right?
Mm.
And yeah, so indeed there is an analogy here, and yeah, so it's really important to allow yourself to learn, and and making mistakes is part of the process. When an adult sees an object far away, the adult makes a conjecture and says, "Oh yeah, it's probably this and that,"
Mm.
and doesn't see any reason to approach the object and examine it. Whereas the child would go to the object, turn it around, play with it. So
Mhm.
playing is actually a way of learning. And sometimes you get bruised because you do the wrong thing, but at the end, you know more than if you were to assume that you know the answer in advance, which is what unfortunately many experts currently do.
So, as founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative, what do you think are the most exciting recent developments in black hole research, and how do you think understanding black holes helps us answer broader questions about the origins of the universe?
Well, a black hole is a very interesting concept because it's an extreme structure of space and time. And it's a region where if you enter, you can't leave. Even light cannot escape from it. So you can think of it as the ultimate prison. Or another way to think of it is as the ultimate Las Vegas. Everything that happens in it stays there.
Mm.
So, um, and it's amazing that nature makes those objects by two ways. One is when a star consumes its nuclear fuel, it cannot produce heat that will keep it against gravitational collapse. And if the star is very massive, more than 10 times the mass of the sun,
Mm.
then gravity pulls all the matter inwards and eventually ends up in making a black hole.
Mm. Mm.
And those black holes were discovered recently because some of them appear in pairs and they spiral towards each other and emit gravitational waves. These are ripples of space-time. So they create a storm of space-time when they merge. And then the ripples propagate all the way through the universe, and we can detect the ripples in space-time with a laser interferometer here on Earth. LIGO was the experiment that discovered it in 2015, and that was an amazing discovery, not only of black holes, but also of gravitational waves, and the Nobel Prize was awarded for that. Now, remarkably, if you have material falling into the black hole, it glows because it gets very hot as it gets compressed close to the black hole. And it's sort of like a wallpaper of light that illuminates space, but what you see, if you were to look at it, you would see a shadow because radiation coming or light coming from behind the black hole would get absorbed by the black hole.
Mhm.
So it would appear as a silhouette.
Wow.
And about 20 years ago, I wrote several papers forecasting how the image of a black hole would look like.
Mm.
And when I founded the Black Hole Initiative, we had established around the same time the Event Horizon Telescope. And the goal of that project was to image black holes and look for their silhouette.
Mm.
And in the conference room of the Black Hole Initiative, the first image of a black hole was obtained.
Oh.
And that was remarkable. We could see the silhouette by now of two black holes, one at the center of the Milky Way galaxy,
Yeah.
which it has 4 million times the mass of the sun.
Mm. Mm.
It's called Sagittarius A star. And the second one is in a much bigger, a giant galaxy that is called the M87.
Yes.
That is about 2,000 times farther, but the black hole is about almost 2,000 times bigger in mass. So
Mm.
the image is roughly the same size, and on this when projected on the sky. So anyway, now we have an image of a black hole. We know that the black holes exist because we detected gravitational waves from the merger of black holes. So
Mm.
they're definitely real. The question is what happens at their center?
Mm.
If matter falls into a black hole, where does it end? It gets compressed. If an astronaut were to enter a black hole, then as the astronaut falls closer to the center, the body of the astronaut will get torn apart. I once discussed it in class in the kindergarten where my daughter was, and the teacher said, because one of the students asked, "What will happen to my body when I fall into a black hole?" So I started describing that the toes will be pulled apart from the head, and the teacher said, "Please stop here because they will have nightmares." But I found that people are fascinated by black holes because they are so unusual. If you come close to a black hole, a very massive black hole, like the one in the Sagittarius A star at the center of the Milky Way, or M87, then as you get close to the event horizon from where you cannot escape, this is the prison wall around it, then time will pass more slowly. So you can imagine beauty salons there where people age more slowly. They just go there and spend a little time, and then they age more slowly than elsewhere. They're friends, and they remain younger. You can actually, if you get close to a black hole, you can see your back by looking forward, because your image, the light, is going in a circle around the black hole. The gravity is so strong there. The curvature of space-time is so strong. You can imagine having a lot of fun near a black hole because there are jets propagating at the speed of light. You could imagine a civilization throwing their trash towards the black hole and getting clean energy in return, because the black hole converts about a tenth of the rest mass into radiation. And that's more efficient by a factor of at least 10 than nuclear reactors. So gravity is so strong near a black hole that you get a lot of benefits if you live close to a supermassive black hole.
Thank you for explaining. Wow. I really appreciate that. As you were speaking, my mind was also wondering, thinking, I wonder if there's a correlation between consciousness and black holes and some connection with the unified theory of everything.
Well, yeah, because one of the pillars of physics is quantum mechanics, and we don't understand it at a fundamental level. And one thing that we know about quantum mechanics is that when you do an experiment, before you do the experiment, the quantum mechanical system is uncertain. It's described by a so-called wave function that gives you the probability of the system being in different states, but you don't know in which state it exists. And once you do the experiment and you know in which state it exists, the system itself transforms into that state. That's it. It doesn't have the other possibilities. You sort of collapse the wave function. And there is this beautiful, thought experiment about Schrodinger's cat. If you imagine a cat in a box, the cat can be dead or alive, depending on whether some radioactive element decays or not, because it will trigger a gun that will kill the cat or something like that. And then if you don't know whether the radioactive element decayed or not, then the cat would be in a superposition of being alive and dead. And but quantum mechanics will say, yes, that's exactly right. You can't really tell. And there is a superposition of both states. And there is another thought experiment. Suppose that the explanation to why quantum mechanics is not deterministic, that you can be in multiple states, and is because there are many worlds. Okay, so every possibility is realized in a different world, and they coexist. And once you do the experiment, you go into one of these worlds. Okay, so that's and there is a way of testing that, because imagine that you have the same gun that I was talking about in the context of the cat, and it's like a Russian roulette, and you don't know if it will kill you or not. But if you keep hearing the clicks of a Russian roulette and you are always alive, then you know that the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct, because you will only live in the world where you still are alive. And in all the other worlds, you will die. So if you stay alive for, without anything happening to you, then, but that's not a good experiment to try, because if this interpretation of quantum mechanics is wrong, you will die. And that's, So at any event, there is this connection between what we are conscious of
Mm.
and the physical reality, which is described by quantum mechanics. And that's still a puzzle. So just to address what you suggested,
Thank you.
definitely. And now how to connect that to black holes? Well, there is the idea that maybe one interpretation of this, it's called the entanglement of quantum mechanics, where a system exists in a given state, and you don't know what this state is
Mhm.
until you collapse it. But it could be multiple states, and if you measure the system at one place, it affects what happens at a very far away place that is part of the system immediately. And so the question is, how is that possible? How does the system know to communicate the fact that you measured the system in one place? How can it affect a very far away location that is part of the system
Mm.
instantly? And one idea is maybe the two are sort of connected by space-time, by some kind of a bridge of space-time that is called a wormhole. So some
Yeah.
people suggested that. Anyway, so yeah, there could be something that we really do not understand about consciousness, about the physical reality as described by quantum mechanics.
Mm.
And I would include that as part of the ocean of ignorance that we are still facing.
I
Yeah.
love that ocean of ignorance. I'm definitely going to use that and credit you. That's fantastic. I often say, I'm a multidimensional being having a human experience, but I don't know.
By the way,
More than
when
to
I
find
think
out.
about myself, I don't have a better understanding than when I think about other people. I've
Mm.
never seen my liver, I've never seen my heart. I never had an open heart surgery, so I don't feel that I'm better connected to myself than to other people in a way. It's just that I have more data about myself because everywhere I go, myself follows me, and I have that information. But but it's really, I mean, my ignorance is not just about everything in the world. It's also about myself. I don't. And so by interacting with people, I can learn about myself because I see them as, humans similar to me. So it's
Right.
just like finding family members of Oumuamua and figuring out what Oumuamua used to be just by finding them. So
Yeah.
when I interact with other humans, when I speak with you, I can learn more about myself as well.
Oh, this it's beautiful and so modest, and I feel the same way about myself and everything in different perspectives. But you're so incredible and amazing. It just blows my mind how humble you are. But I what I use as a guide is like energy doesn't lie, nor does frequency, and that's my passion with music and sound and vibration. I have a point for this for this flow of thought, but like the idea that like cymatics, right? And you have the right frequency and it could produce beautiful geometric patterns. Our bodies are made of water. There's a reason why people love sound baths and healing because it can revitalize the cells and heal diseases and things like that. It makes me think as a creative too, and the imagination, the childlike curiosity that we spoke about earlier. In terms of advanced civilizations, if if it was down to frequencies and vibrations, w if they were looking at planet Earth and what we see in the media is an example, an amplification of the chaos, would they want to even engage in that lower vibrational state of conflict, right? Because the way I feel and see is that it's an illusion. It's an veil of illusion that we're separate from one another, that we judge each.
That may well be the case. If they are much more advanced than we are, they can probably figure us out even without speaking with us. That
That's
I
right.
mean,
And quantum
yeah.
entangle and telepathy. So, like, as a thought experiment, if you had a telepathic encounter with a higher dimensional being or an ET, it's pure speculative. What would be your first thought or question that you would have based on
Oh, the
everything
first
that
one
you've
is
learned?
what happened before the Big Bang. I would really like to know that because this is our cosmic root. That's where we started, the Big Bang, and we have very little knowledge. All we can see is what happened afterwards. And in principle, the our universe may have started as a baby universe in the laboratory of an advanced technological civilization. There was a scientist in a white lab coat that created the baby universe that we live in. That's a possibility. And because that would explain, you can have our universe creating new universes by advanced scientists, and it could be babies made out of babies and so forth forever, just the way humans are. Um, but I would like to know what happened before the Big Bang, if they know that. And the second question, of course, is where is the nearest hub of intelligent civilization, so I can go there and chat with others, and I would like to be a little more social. Uh,
This was fun. Thank you so much, Abby. I do have one last question, which is an inspirational one. Actually, two parts. Firstly, what would you like to be remembered for, slash, what are you excited about coming up for 2025 and beyond? And then the second question is, what advice do you have for the younger generations following their curiosity?
Right. So in terms of what I would like to be remembered about is what I will find in the future. I'm not that proud of what I did so far, and I really hope the future holds some exciting discovery, especially dealing with extraterrestrials if they are out there. And so the best is yet to come. Let's put it that way. I used to have a lot of file cabinets in my office that were filled with stuff from my past when I was department chair and so forth. And a few months ago, I decided to get rid of all of them. I said to my administrator, I said to my assistant, just take them out of my office. I don't need to see them anymore. And the reason is that a very distinguished sculptor, Greg Wyatt, donated two sculptures of Galileo Galilei, and I turned my office into a mini museum now.
Oh.
And when people ask me, how did you have the courage to, remove everything from your past? I said, well, the exciting part is still in the future, and so the same. How do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered by the future. And then in terms of my advice to young people is stay young. Never pretend to be the adults in the room, and just treat your life as a learning experience. And whatever comes your way, learn from it. Listen, don't always speak. Okay, so that's an important advice in dating as well.
Well, thank you so much, Avi, for joining the podcast today. You're an inspiration for me, and I believe in divine timing of us connecting through Nick from Interstellar Foundation. Thank you, Nick, if you're listening. And yeah, it's really humbling to hear someone so expertise in the area, but so willing to give and also acknowledge that they're learning. And I think we can take a lot from that in our pursuit in life, no matter what it is, and to follow that curiosity and to honor that inner child within each and every one of us, because that never leaves. And I love what you said about being remembered by the future, and you definitely will be and are, because there's only the perpetual now. So
Thank
thank
you so much. By the way, I didn't have these important lessons in mind when I started the journey when I was young, and I made a lot of mistakes. And what I told you is, just what I learned from those experiences. So I wouldn't pretend to be that smart. It's basically life that taught me these lessons.
Well, thank you for sharing, and that's what makes us so special as humans. So thanks once again, Abby.
Thank you for having me.